What's up? This is the Independent Musician Podcast, where we dig into the deeper aspects of music, philosophical, and other aspects of art. Talking today with Vong. He's a synth player over here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're going to talk about cultural appropriation.
Cool.
What's up, man?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
So kind of encapsulate in as short a sentence as you can, kind of what we were talking about the other day.
Oh, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. Go.
Oh, snap! All right. So we met up, and for some reason, we kind of came first from talking about like how we approach music, but also of the concept of borrowing ideas from different places, and sometimes that could lead to. We led to a talk about the morphing of culture, but also the borrowing of different cultures into our, I guess, artistic directions, in a way.
So like what we were kind of digging into, like what are the negative aspects of being influenced and using ideas that originated from like a certain, usually ethnic culture.
Yes. Yeah.
And like, so I guess, so what are the benefits of us culturally appropriating? So let's give an example where.
I would say, I guess in a way, a lot of it would be just like the initial introduction of an aspect of culture to maybe a different audience. Like, I guess in a way, like food is a good way to think about it. Of like, you travel to a country. Let's say someone travels to a country, sees this like dish, and it's like, wow, I had never had that before. And they'll bring it over, bring it back home. However, they could have not thought about like what kind of goes into that. And create like an interpretation in a way. So
in the same sense that like whatever the origin of pizza was, whether it was America or Italy or something, nobody knows. It's gotten to the point where whoever brought it from wherever it is, we don't even know. And so we don't even pay homage to the creator of something that was really great. Right. We enjoy it, and it's become a national phenomenon, which is a beautiful thing. And now, obviously, the entire world enjoys pizza.
Right.
But a lot of the nuances, perhaps, of what made it's beautiful and unique aspects are lost.
What made it distinctively Italian? I don't know. Oh yeah, wherever it came from. People say, oh, it's from Italy. Oh, but there's probably other places and all that. I'm not an expert. I'm no authority. But this kind of person. But I'm definitely like a fun thinker.
So the two sides of that are, the side forward is that. Let's take that back to music. If you're able to take some inspiration from a pretty niche like culture, let's say you like something, I don't know, like witch house is not a popular genre and probably never will be because it has some aspects that are just kind of alienating to a general audience. Yes. But it's also got some really unique aspects, and it has a culture because the people that gravitate to the stuff are there's not very many of them, and so when they find each other, there's like an instant kinship. And so if I were try to take the aspects of Witch House and then be able to package it in something that's far more palatable by shaving off some of the edgier aspects of that, I can introduce that to the mainstream audience. Perhaps that would catch on, and it would be a beautiful thing because millions of people perhaps could enjoy at least a certain percentage of what made Witch House beautiful. And then the negative aspect of that is I shaved off it, and no one could enjoy the aspects of Witch House in its fullest extent because I've watered it down, and I've effectively become the definition of Witch House simply because I'm more popular than the original birth creators of it.
Yeah, the original like community of Witch House. Yeah. So, and like historically speaking, that has happened, especially in the from R&B to rock and roll, from I don't know, it was called rock and roll before Elvis, but definitely it was marketed for that. Like, what was it? Rock, the sound of rock was definitely predominantly a music played by black people. But what's interesting is that Elvis sort of became that icon. A white dude becoming an icon of music that's predominantly played by black people. And what in that case I'm trying to like, gather all my thoughts on this.
What you were saying the other day was that like it's beautiful because we have rock and roll and the millions of like it's I guess you could say
it's
face of music.
It's introduced. It's because like that's the thing, like actually because back in the day, I'm pretty sure most most predominantly, white people were uncomfortable of listening to rock or being around folks who played rock because of that fair to say slight racism.
Yeah, we'll go prejudice.
Yeah, prejudice. That's a great word.
Yeah.
But now there's this space where they can say, "Oh, I can listen to this music, and my mom is okay with me seeing this, seeing Elvis representing this music, seeing this, someone who looks like me, or someone who's, that innate prejudice that comes in."
Yeah, well, and the bigger idea is that part of the edgier aspects of that, music, was really not the music in of itself. It was the fact that it was played by a certain race, which at the time you had a negative perception of, at least from an art perspective. It was this elitist thing. I mean, but to take it in a non-racist direction, there's other things where, if you see a pretty person or a cool, which you in your mind, however you define it, a cool person playing certain music. If Nirvana's music was originally played by somebody who didn't look and wasn't culturally appropriate at the time, like Kurt Cobain and the rest of Nirvana, it wouldn't have worked. That was honestly how it was presented. It wasn't just the music. It wasn't just the sound. It was also how you see Kurt Cobain playing it. He was a part of a cultural movement. Grunge, is not just a music genre. It's a culture genre that is encapsulated in that. And because if you start doing Elvis played music that was effectively really similar, musically. I mean, if you just listen to your ears, extremely similar to what was created by the black culture at the time, but he put a different face on, literally did a different face on it. And so I think it goes far beyond how we listen to music, and I think it's extremely imperative that we see that a lot of our music tastes are heavily influenced by what we consider cool. I mean, cool, you don't use the word cool as an adult, but you get a certain feeling. It's not elitism, but it's elitism is a subset of it. That again, it's that feeling and self-perception you get. It's the reason why when you were 14 or I guess 16, you drive down the street and you see guys blasting rap or rock, and because it makes you feel cool,
right?
And the same reason a prog metal musician's I listen to blah blah blah, or a jazz head's the same thing.
So I guess the question is why, right? I'm trying to say we listen to these types of music of during that time when it's, I guess, considered rebellious. Is that what you're trying to say? Is that what you're trying to say? Or
it's well, the thing is, there's always that thin line of too rebellious, because there's lots of really edgy, offensive stuff, and there always has been and always will be. But if it's too much, it's not going to be attractive, part of it's just luck, and you just happen to have the right elements that, the black culture was too edgy.
But that's interesting, right? Why it's interesting why it's considered quote unquote edgy, and then they had to have someone to say, I'm now more comfortable to listen to this piece of music because it's a different face. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you have to. It's an iterative thing. It's similar to if I show my dad some of the, I don't know, heavier music, not the craziest stuff, the heavy music that I listen to. He's probably gonna be he can't resonate with it. Why? Because he came from listen to Chicago, and then he missed 10 steps.
Okay.
And now we're here. So if you kind of walked up to the steps of there, you're okay, somebody's screaming at me. It's not a big thing. Why? Because somebody's been screaming at me for 10 years, and starting at something it has to be an iterative walk up to it. And so, what I think is what the culture all wants something edgy and forbidden, but just a little bit,
Right.
And
And now, so over time, this piece of culture is iterated to where it morphs into something totally different. Well, not totally different. Well, I would say pretty different, to where it doesn't reflect what it once was. Right, but it's now more palatable. Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah,
I mean that just this the nature of inspiration. I don't think obviously Elvis, as far as I can tell, had no intentions of appropriating or stealing or not paying homage in any way, shape, or form to what he was taking from it. But pragmatically, just the facts, he stole he was given credit. We'll go with given credit for creating this sound, which he effectively didn't do a huge amount of.
Right. Well, so interestingly about Elvis, he was raised in a black neighborhood, like a poor black neighborhood. So he grew up with that music. However, who is it? He's like a talent scout. He was a
like an agent
who named Sam Phillips, who I can't remember the exact quote, but it's definitely something I wouldn't say out loud. But essentially, he basically said this: I need to find a white dude who can sing like a black dude. He knew that there are this group of people who are uncomfortable with listening to a music that is associated with black people. And so he found Elvis, who can be that face, right? So obviously, like you said, Elvis did not intentionally, he didn't actively say like, oh, this black music, I'm gonna play that.
This seems what's cool. He's like, he just liked it.
He grew up with it.
That's what he was passionate
exactly. About. He grew up with it. That was part of his vocabulary. That is part of his culture.
But okay, so to take that from a modern light, so we're far more aware of this stuff, for better and worse.
Yeah.
It's so knowing that, let's take a comparable example. Let's say I was raised in an environment where I was heavily influenced by a culture that I.
You were in Japan, and you grew up with. I'm trying to think like.
Traditional Japanese.
Yeah, like Shomyo Buddhist chants.
Sure, and so and that's my stuff. I love it, and then that's just kind of what flows out of me is passionate. And so then I create music. It's going to be influenced, and let's say I take heavy influence that, because to me, like where I came from, it was normal. Like it was just to me iterate on top of that. But to hear, you're like, whoa, this guy is like on the pinnacle of it. And let's say I was able to do it intentionally or not, like in a way that was extremely palatable. But I know we are very aware of how like cultural appropriation works now. It's not, you can't feign ignorance, or you can feign, I guess you can, but
it's still, I still think we're in that stage of figuring out what it really is, because we both, like from both sides, would say this is not cultural appropriation. I merely am part of this, or like even though I, I guess quote unquote look different or come from a different, totally different, community or whatever. But then there's the other side of demonizing, trying to pick out certain things, say this is bad, what you're doing, even though you aren't intentionally aware of it, is bad. So, and I think it's still not truly defined, if that makes sense.
When you say like this is the particular things are bad, what are some examples of? In this example of like where I appropriated this music, inspired, whatever. What are some negative consequences that could, short term and long term, that could come out of that?
So, obviously, with Elvis, he introduced, him being the face of rock and roll, introduced rock and roll to to the world, or at least to all of the United States. And actually, funny thing, I think he definitely I don't know if it's Chuck Berry or someone, but he was actually able to bring up some black rock and roll musicians to play with him. So
that sounds like a good thing, though.
It does sound like a good thing. However, I mean, so that's definitely like could be considered a positive.
Okay.
I would say on the other side, he definitely played tunes like Tutti Frutti, Nothing But a Hound Dog. Like those weren't his songs. Those were covers, and they're very different. They are not the same. They don't have like that same soulful grit that it did have, because it was meant to, I guess you could say, quote unquote, be more palatable. But because of that, you have a totally new definition now of, I guess, rock and roll. It, like you said, it loses what made it distinct, what made it unique, but also, in a way.
So you're saying the ownership is changing.
Exactly. That,
but that's not inherently
ownership.
A bad thing, is it?
I'll say this.
Oh, but the thing is, you're letting a capitalist market decide who owns this cultural thing.
Something like that. But also to say, it is interesting how we did not appreciate it with this certain culture, but now this like this other culture, which I guess in the U.S. you can say, at least at that time period, it was predominantly white, right? Predominantly white, or at least can say most of the decisions made or
the consumer market was owned by our corporate overlords were white,
or definitely more white,
heavily,
yeah. So it is interesting that they had to reassign a new appearance to this piece, like to black culture, to make it more acceptable to white culture or to everyone.
But I mean, again, I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. So actually, this is where we went last time. It was the short term. I don't inherently see a huge problem with that. What we were talking about is the long term ramifications of that. Is when it starts feeding back. So like you have this black niche group of musicians. We'll kind of take it abstract. This niche group of musicians that come together and just inspire things, and they create this rough but like unique-ish, I think. And then somebody comes in and takes the palatable aspects of that and kind of leaves a little bit of the nicheness, but makes it more palatable, and then sells it to the world. And he kind of gets credit for it. Okay, that's not inherently a problem. Okay, these guys still are here. They can keep in their own thing and they can keep making music.
Right.
But what happens is because this achieved mainstream success, this is going to start affecting what originally was the group. And so this will start merging as more and more people, or as the next generation of this genre, it'll actually move towards the palatable aspects of it and away from where it started.
Okay, yeah.
Again, is it a bad thing? It's a thing, though.
It's a thing, and I would say this. Yes, so in long term, as as the music, the culture moves, kind of transitions or morphs into something that's quote unquote more accepted. I think it's interesting to say this, that I have a friend who who plays. He's black and he plays rock music, but it's interesting because the comments he'll get is this: "You sound like a white dude." But and why I say that's interesting is because, well, the music originally comes from black culture, and now it is like you said, it is reassigned to something totally different now. That we now say, oh, rock and roll is quote unquote white.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but because functionally it is. Because I don't know your friend, but I would say probably almost all the musicians that he was heavily influenced by to play rock music were probably white.
I can't say for sure, but maybe. However,
because most rock musicians have been white, so that's why.
The ones that we know about.
Yeah, I assume he's not into some super obscure. He might be. I don't know.
Unfortunately, I do not know. But that is interesting, right? That we only know about the white rock and roll musicians when. There was a lot of of black rock and roll musicians. We just don't know about them because we're not how you say being introduced to them,
and because for the variety of reasons that's the case, the market didn't bring them to us, and we didn't.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is it's interesting, especially something so where like music is such a big part of our identity in a way, and unfortunately, I guess I'd say like. Our nationality, ethnicity, and our race is definitely as much as we don't like to admit it. Sometimes it does make part of our identity and our community, to where, at least in this case, it's so difficult for me to talk about this.
We're going on YouTube. You can offend everyone.
Yeah, I know exactly right. So. Like back in the day, like definitely, being black was considered bad. Like, they were almost, being
considered less.
They were considered less, and that's the thing. And where they want to be able to be proud of aspects of the culture. In this case, was music, right?
So, like part of their identity, and which means by identity you mean part of the way they assign value to themselves,
right? Like how this community, how this group of people. Of what they enjoy, and they can share that enjoyment. In this case, I'm going to say rock music. In this case, is something. This is part of our identity, and we are proud to hold this in our hearts, and say this is us, right? But once over time, now that's obviously that has changed. it's like this. It's interesting to see that we love your music. We want to be able to use that said music, and now it's now being reassigned. It's not say taken away, but definitely reassigned over to where it's predominantly now a more white culture in a way. And so now they don't, unfortunately, they can't say like, oh, we have this, right?
But the problem with that is that you're assigning the genesis to be like black people birthed this from nothing. Mm-hmm. And that
I'm not saying that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you kind of have to at different points. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, we all liked, like when you're a kid, like, oh, they don't make music like they did back in the day, and then your back in the day is the genesis. But you don't see that, like, whatever I listened to when I was 14 was the first music that I listened to. So I kind of view that as the starting, the creation, day of creation.
Yeah.
And so like assigning, like they created this culture. It was like, well, no, they were inspired by X things that got them to there.
Yeah.
And they effectively stole, appropriated, whatever. I mean, inspired by. Yeah. And they effectively took identities and changed something. Like, obviously, cultural appropriation has a much more profound effect now because communication is completely different. Like, it's more, but it's just different, you know?
Yeah.
And so I guess, why is it not okay? I mean, they're not static things. They're always, like, at best case, it's going to be evolving. And you're going to be inspired by or derivative. And somebody can take these niche ideas that make your culture whatever. I mean, why? Like I said, the pizza is a good example. Like let's say like food is an example, an excellent example of culture, especially historically. Like Italians, like for instance, I'm speaking out of ignorance here, but like most every Italian is very proud of like this aspect of my mother's cooking. Even the South, very much. This is my mother's recipe.
Sure,
like they're proud of something that their mother did in cooking in the kitchen, and that just happens to be part of their culture. You know, and so. And even my mother, like my grandmother, didn't want to give some of her recipes away because I think in some ways, like even to her, like her daughter, because in some ways I think that was part of her identity, and she held that sacredly. Yeah. But the thing is, but if you withhold that and you don't allow other people to share it, you rob them of the ability for them to build their identity on what you had. Right. And so, isn't it in some ways, from an individual level, I think it's selfish. From a group identity level, like you want to maintain.
You want to be able to maintain that integrity of where it came from. I think that's like you mentioned paying homage. You mentioned the appreciation and to be able to integrate that, to share that culture, right? But I guess the question is, does making it palatable sort of keep the integrity of where it came from?
I think. So I think this is something I actually just thought of. I think this is something that's never assigned, and because there's this other side of it, like when they make it popular, they'll taint it for us. I was like, well, and then it's your responsibility to keep it pure. Yes, there are certain things that you can't change, but to assign full blame on them and say like, oh, they're changing it, and then I guess we're screwed. It's like no, like I think it's yours, and I think the Asian culture does a great job. This particular Japanese culture, like not Korean less. And I say this is a huge difference between Korean and Japanese culture. They're like. And a Western culture is like, you need to change this aspect of yourself because we changed it here. They're like, we don't care what you think. This is sacred to us. They're like, you shouldn't do that. That's dumb. We fixed it over here. They're like, we don't care.
Right.
And I think Korea is far more like, okay. Like, and I think it often overwrites your culture and it requires, but I think it's a problem, I think more in the West because we have a far more individualist mindset. And so I think we gain as... Again, I'm making sweeping judgments here. And I definitely am projecting here because I have far less of a group identity for a litany of reasons. Like, I'm far more focused on, like, developing myself as an individual because I don't get a whole lot of agency by being part of a group because there's not much of one, you know? Like, religion is obviously a big one, and race can be, but... I would say, and maybe, again, I'm speaking out of ignorance, but this is just personal experience, like, being white doesn't give you a huge racial identity because it's what, 60% of America, and it's come from so many different places, and it's been, there's so much difference in it that there's not a whole lot of homogeneity, so it doesn't really help you much.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And so it's harder for me to understand, like, why are you guys, like, gaining identity from having a collective? Because I don't. And you're like, well, that doesn't mean that other people don't have that.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, I'm just
Oh,
running hard here.
Oh,
but-
you're good. Just trying to take everything in. Yeah, no, okay. So I totally understand you there. So you're saying that I was gonna say, like, for at least for you, like you said, you didn't feel that, like, you didn't feel that sense of community, but you felt more working on on the individual, correct? And where you came from.
Yeah, I guess it's less of like the things that I find community in now are more of their not really genetic qualities, or they're more of like I like people, like I have a community with nerdy studio people who want to spend 10 hours tweaking a notch filter or something,
Right.
like, but that has nothing to do inherently with my upbringing or my race or my genetics for the most part.
So, but I guess that'll be like different for other folks who are not white. Where oh snap! From where they, like, at least historically speaking, they didn't really have I'd say they were, would you agree that like some groups were definitely marginalized back in the day?
Sure.
Right. Like,
and so they developed.
so they developed a community to be able to kind of go through that.
Yeah, and I think it was an organic thing. Like nobody sought out like, well, we should develop a community. It was like, we had to.
Yeah,
exactly. Suffering brings people together. You know?
And like the development, like a lot of development of the arts and and the food culture was coming from suffering. Was like the concept of soul food.
So we'll go with external forces.
External forces,
Like,
sure. Yeah. That kind of like really pushed them together in a way.
Which can be geography, which can be, like the way that Europe is right now. It's like kind of has these bunch of these like sort of homogenous things just because of geography at the time, or geography way back in the day.
Right. So, but I think it's more emphasized in the U.S. because of our recent, history among the few couple centuries, right? And like to be, well, I guess like say like to be not white. Like I'm sorry, like to bring it back to that.
That's exactly what.
But that's the thing is like because of that they had to be able to like not like in a way not band together but to say like we got each other and we want to be able to feel proud about ourselves in certain aspects because we are in a way kind of said not to be like to be as Chinese immigration. We're going way out right now.
No, that's good.
But there was like literal laws that banned Chinese from coming over, and once they did come over, like they were seen as lesser. They were seen as animals. They were seen as like these strange creatures, and so in a way, they kind of say like, well, we'll try to figure out ways to make ourselves, look good. And to be like exactly like to feel prideful, to feel proud about ourselves when we're told not to be, in a way, and
just naturally expressing themselves, like the humans express themselves through arts,
right?
Because we do
exactly. But in this case, it's like a whole community versus the individual, right?
Yeah.
So to have something that's skew its meaning, like an aspect of their culture being skewed, makes them seem. I would say. Why is it like for them it's like this why are certain things that we do like considered other, but when you do it it's more or less okay? Was it a bunch of my friends, we talk about this all the time. It's crazy, but it's like one example is this: when someone black is twerking, why is it considered ratchet or like not, it's not saying like, oh, not cool, but like, yeah, I guess ratchet in a way, and saying like, oh, that's gross, why would you do that? But when say Miley Cyrus does it, it's she'd be considered empowered, like women's empowerment.
Well, I think part of that is it's like what is not victim hierarchy, but like
okay,
we're trying to figure out which like a historically oppressed group we're trying to prioritize a little bit. I think there.
I guess so.
I think
if we want to talk about just in this scenario, right? I'm not gonna say like, oh, who's worse than who, and who. That doesn't matter right now. In this case, it's just this scenario. So, if we want to tie it back to music, yes, the borrowing of music obviously is not intentional because we all love music. Music is a great thing, but when you have, like you said, this like capitalistic like infrastructure, say we can use this aspect, this music, to be able to sell it to other people, but we just need to change it a bit, and then that becomes the defining aspect.
But I guess to me, like it's just like a religion. Actually, this is a great example.
Okay.
It is the religion as a whole's responsibility to fight against and resist and condemn change and evolution that is against its values and corrupts it. I mean, because like you take Christianity, like Christianity is the religion that built the Western world, you know, and you take the functional application of Christianity today and rewind 10 years, it's actually pretty profound. You rewind 100 years, it is massively profound. Like people like talk about like how Christianity is super oppressive. It's like, dude, God, like they're progressive, like comparatively, like progressive, like, and a lot of people and a lot of fundamentalists, I mean, or we'll go with classical, whatever you want to call them. We'll go with fundamentalist sounds like attacking, but we'll go, they have these are the fundamentals of what made this religion this. And then some people took that, it was like, whoa, man, why don't we like soften off on the gay stuff and the hate stuff and the hell stuff, and like I know this little part of like the Bible, and let's just kind of not want to ignore it. We'll just kind of not talk about it, and we'll make you know not denominations are a little too let's make this more accessible. And it's gotten to the point where it's effectively the pop music of
Christianity,
and which made it like way more accessible, and so the churches were filled with people like in the 90s, like or 80s, the Jesus movement. Basically, Billy Graham was able to like shave off in a hugely popular way all of these edgier aspects and sell this to a thing. And a lot of people had a lot of issues with him because like you are tainting this, you are appropriating our religion, which is like a big deal, and you're changing it to the point where it's not the same thing anymore, and it's wrong. You're breaking it. And guess what? Most of those people don't exist anymore. Why? Because they got bred out of the population because they were a minority. They became the silenced minority. Now, do those people still exist?
Yeah.
Yes. And should they? I mean, I guess it's how much do you believe that like the market made out of a bunch of individuals' agency together decides and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Neither. Right. I mean, it created like modern Christianity, which has a lot of like it made it a palatable religion for today. A lot of people get a lot of things out of modern Christianity that they would not have been able to do if Billy Graham and those guys hadn't changed, altered, appropriated, and like basically bullied out the old definitions of Christianity, a lot of the old definitions of Christianity. Right. But the thing is, if you want to find fundamentalist. Like we were just talking about it before, like that one, like the one, like they're still there. There's clearly still a small, minuscule market for them, and they are keeping the torch, and they don't care where the market has gone. And they prefer, obviously, they care, obviously, they wish they hadn't, but they're going to, and they see it as their responsibility to maintain the culture that they have.
I gotcha. So
you guess I see. I'm like, it's not. I feel like all the responsibility is typically dumped on the people changing it, as opposed to I'm like, well, you need to take some responsibility to maintain your own culture. Like the way you got your culture here is you change somebody else's, you know? And if you believe this is pure and it needs to be mostly unaltered, then it is your responsibility as much as you are possible to maintain your own traditions and no one else's.
Okay. Right. So, but I would say that it's a lot harder to do that, especially when there was something like, when there's something bigger, definitely not say enforcing, but definitely spreading it to where it is nomenclature. It is, it is the norm of this, like you said, with how, Christianity turned into, I guess, modern Christianity today, when it, not say it lost meaning, but it's definitely now very, very different than what fundamentalist, Christianity was, right? But that's what I'm saying about music, that, like you said, we know more, I guess, white rock and roll musicians, but way less, black musicians. And they, what am I trying to say?
Well, I guess to me, like, it's, especially now, like I said, because we have an awareness of these things happening and like as a culture, we are far more conscious of the market's going to change it. If it's good, the market's going to pick it up, corrupt it, whatever you want, effectively corrupt it. That doesn't mean it's going to be bad. It's just going to be bad compared to what you want it to be.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, and so knowing that, how are you going to like prevent or save the sacredness of it?
Right.
Like we were talking about or I was talking about Fallout 76 is, if you rewind, to me, like Wasteland was this super edgy thing. Fallout 1 and 2 were my Christianity. Like I think they were great.
Yeah.
And then Fallout 3 and then scoot through Fallout 3 came out and was like, all right, this has shaved off a lot of it. I still like Fallout 1 and 2 better, but this is really palatable. And after that, I was like, this is so corrupted, I don't care anymore. But the thing is, I don't complain. I understand that Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 are way more popular than those other games will ever be.
Yeah.
But I still preach the values of it, and I live those values of it, of what I thought was the more pure and better like examples of it.
Right. But like no one would know about those. That's the thing, right?
That's my fault. And maybe, I mean, like that's going to happen either way. And I can complain about it, which complaining actually just brings more attention to, historically has always brought more attention and actually helped the other side. Or I can focus on like instantiating any individual change I can. But the reality is, I know Fallout 1 and 2 are not accessible. They're beautiful to me, and like I mean, as an artist, you realize you see so many things that are beautiful to you that and you can't share them. The rest of the world can't. It's not palatable to them, and I that's unfortunate. It's sad, I think, to me, but it's also a reality, and it's to somehow enforce some sort of change to prevent that happening will be so destructive. I guess it is a problem. But I would say you can save, at least in your community, a lot of the problems of it by focusing on teaching and spreading the words of why this thing and spreading why these ideas that you have, whether it's a religion or it's musical or it's a Fallout game, why you should, like, you can teach these things in your own communities, you know?
Right. So yeah, no, I totally understand that. I guess the scare is mostly it being faded away because they're not able to sustain themselves. Like,
I'll give an example.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the Native American cultures, for a long list of reasons, like they are like Native American, like what do you call it, languages.
Sure.
Like there's a few that, like, I've read some articles recently that they use, like, two people speak of this on the planet, and guess what? They refuse to teach it. Like, they don't want to, because, like, no, it'll be tainted. And so, because they're not willing to risk tainting this thing will die. And is that okay? Well, I mean, I think those are your two options. Either let it be corrupt, or proselytize, or let it die. And I mean, I think there's a lot of things that, like I say, humanity has proven that you can sustain things that far past their expiration date and just keep doing them. The concept of a tradition is basically that. Christmas is dumb. Like, the aspects of Christmas, like, we put up a tree that we stole from, like, Celtic something,
pagan,
and we put lights on it because originally we had candles, but now we don't have candles. We did lights because something. We have presents, Saint Nick or Sears, but we're to the point where, like, we love it. It brings people together. Is it dumb? There's no, like, logical, like, reason why we should do this, but we've decided to maintain this tradition. Why? Because we did it last year and our grandparents did it, and like, we are keeping this thing alive, and we're going to do it our way because we did before, and it brings us together, and why not? So it's like I said, it's way past its logical expiration, but you can, like, if you take responsibility for maintaining these things, you can maintain them, I'd say.
Right. But why? I mean, I guess, like, well, that's the thing, right? For maintaining our current, like, Christmas tradition, why is that being able to last? Because I feel like with music, there's more obstacles, especially, like, financially speaking as well. Like, say if you go to, like, a music show and you say, I want you to play jazz or play metal, but they play they play baby metal, right? Because that's considered most popular. Or I don't know metal. I don't know why I bring that up. Give me some very popular, like, say they played new metal, Linkin Park.
Okay, that's not like. Gojira, we'll go with that.
Gojira, sure. Okay, go do that. You know more than me. I probably should have done something totally different. Actually, I will. Sorry. Let's go with EDM. Because that's something I actually do know. If I knew like, say like to a crowd and they say, I want you to play some dope ass EDM tunes. And I played Larry Heard, Frankie Knuckles. They'd be like, doesn't sound like David Guetta.
Can you play a good song? Where's the drop?
Right. But that's interesting because they have because of that change of what is it? That change. No, I want that change of the culture that I can't really say appropriation. I would say maybe a little bit, but because that meaning is lost, it's so difficult to tell them this is what it was, But they'll be like,
let's build some characters into your example. So let's take the group of, we have people that would never listen to those people.
Yeah.
Like it's just,
they've never been exposed to it.
Yeah, and they wouldn't. They're into David Guetta.
David Guetta,
whatever his name is.
David Guetta.
And then you have the guys that like
who started off like
fans early on in that genre. And fans in that niche. They're weird people because they're into a niche genre.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, but if you have David Guetta's, these guys will probably never be able to find these actually like these small guys.
Right, who originated, like that was the original like sound.
So, but that doesn't stop that DJ from playing that. See, the thing is, are you playing music to get fans, or are you playing music to maintain your culture? Because you can do both. But which one? If you're prioritizing your culture, then it doesn't matter when nobody shows up to your shows sometimes, because you're still achieving your same goal. But I think if that's being, again, this doesn't apply super well to the blacks in the 50s, because there's a lot of other forces at work. But like a modern forces, like if I want to play music of my people, whatever that is, like I don't know, Boston or something, I don't know, like the music that I grew up with that I want to pay homage to, that reminds me of my family.
Yeah,
like I still can.
Yeah.
And I can still play to empty rooms, because I will be, but maybe not.
Right.
If that's what I want to do, and I think that's what I need to do to pay homage for it, I don't have to taint it. And I can ignore the market forces there. I will pay the penalty in the sense that the market will do what markets do. It'll ignore you and move on. But if I claim responsibility of it, that I still have the ability to do this, I'm like, no one's stopping me from doing that. I'm de-incentivized, but I'd still say I have the capability to keep this thing alive. If I think it's beautiful, then you and I like some weird music. And guess what? Yeah. We're going to make weird music, and we're going to play to some empty-ish rooms.
Oh, definitely.
The rest of our musical career, because we're like, I hate this. Yeah. But like, I can't sell this part of my soul, Like if I was playing what was super popular completely, yes, I could maybe fill up this room, but like I couldn't, it's not worth it.
Right.
We've chosen to position our actions in a way that keep our own little subsets of culture alive, because you took responsibility of that, or maybe we're just ignorant. I don't know. I assume that's at least somewhere in the reason that you do. But you see how claiming responsibility of it changes. Again, it doesn't get rid of any of the negative aspects of what happens.
Of course not. Yeah,
it still gives you still have the power to keep this flame alive if you want to.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess for me, like the reason why I do music, I guess a lot of times it's really fun, it's cool. But like a lot of the stuff like I've been doing recently, like I'm in a hip hop band. I play keys for a rapper, and mostly because I think it's cool, but I also want to be able to share that idea, share that with folks, and because like in a way, I guess playing with the band, having a rapper being with the band. Not saying it makes it more acceptable, but say like, oh, I've never seen that before. But for me, like how I approach, playing is like, how do I make myself sound like a record in a way of what it kind of was. Like that's the aesthetic.
Oh, you mean like a vinyl?
Yeah, like vinyl. Like what's the aesthetic of, of hip hop in a way? Like it wasn't a band.
So you're trying to pay homage to this culture.
Yeah. to some degree, yeah.
But I'm saying you have that ability to do that.
Right.
And you have also
I'm in that position where I can do that.
Yeah, and you have the ability to I guess to me, maybe I'm a little too pragmatic about this stuff. People are like, "Oh, you appropriate this culture, it's going to die." I was like, "Dude, it's going to die. Your culture, eventually, every single culture is mortal. Like you act like, oh, this thing killed it. I'm like, if it didn't kill it, something else will. Like that is the reality of culture. Culture evolves, and what was left behind will perish, usually through attrition. But like,
Sure.
like I mean, like how many rock bands do you know that like they're playing rock music? It's like,
rock,
dude,
rock and
you're a relic. Like,
right.
you got left behind a long time ago. It's like, yeah, I guess we could like try to make electronic. We'll like use a bass synth. I'm like, you're still playing rock music.
Yeah.
Like that's not the synth on the bass is not the problem. You're like, that's not why. But they choose to like, no, this is what I want to do, and I'm gonna keep doing it, and then eventually rock music as we know it is going to die. I mean, sure, we have the records, but like essentially the soul of it is going to die.
Yeah.
And we've appropriated it into whatever
it becomes a totally new
post
thing.
rock, whatever thing is now, you know? And is that okay? I mean, because, obviously, I'm taking I think most of the arguments about cultural appropriation have a strong racial trend to them.
It definitely does, yes.
Because if I'm just talking about music genres, people are like, it's okay, I mean, music genre. It's okay if we stop doing Christmas trees, you know? Like, but I'm like, and maybe I'm drawing... I think tradition's beautiful. Like, I have this weird thing where I acknowledge, I'm like, these traditions are dumb, but I think they're beautiful, you know? And it's just a habit that unites us together, you know? And I mean, this is part of getting old, I think, is just recognizing that. But...
Yeah.
So you made a really good point where these perceptions of themselves were built up into rock and roll and early blacks. That's part of who they were as a culture, and they needed it because they were in a very oppressive state, like a suffering state. But as that's becoming comparatively far less a thing, should they have like sole ownership of this thing?
I don't know about sole ownership, but I would love to be able to see it coexist in like still, I guess, in a way, like still coexist in a healthy state. I guess that's my take on it.
But would you say like how Japan as a whole handles its relationship with the Western world on a macro cultural level? Do you think that's healthy? Because they're definitely homogenous, but there's also definitely a lot of like.
But there's definitely a lot of like intersectional stuff happening. So like like music, like the music in Japan back in the day was like definitely not quote unquote standardized to where, and then some music dude, some guy like traveled all Japan saying, okay, we need to figure out what's going on. What makes this music Japanese? Boom, we did it. And then when the US came, they introduced a lot of music, a lot of Western, musical ideas over. And what's interesting is that Japan adopted that, but they also, they adopted that where they changed certain scales and whatnot to, to kind of say, like, fit, this can definitely work because they love, they love Western culture. So they love, like, like that, the 50s sounds.
12-tone scale.
Yeah, 12 in a way. Well, that's the thing. Like Japan had those many notes too.
Oh, okay.
But they had what they call tetrachords. There's a great video from Sideways called What makes Miyazaki film sound pretty? And what he talks about is like to have like a good reason of why Joe Hisaishi did the certain things he did, because he compared like his music to like, it might sound like Debussy, but he does certain things that Debussy would never do, or it sounds like modal jazz, like Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock, but there's still little things that he doesn't do. Like, why though? And then he talked about the history of music theory, musicology of Japan.
But I would say the bigger thing is that he took the responsibility of like
how to adapt.
Like, what is the soul of my music? And what is the soul of my culture? I mean, this thing like is not that important. This thing is important. I will modify it, but no, this one little thing is what makes Asian music, right? Or whatever,
right? Yeah.
But I mean, that seems like a healthy way to do that. To see the benefit of the product of being inspired by an alternative or a different culture,
but being able to maintain aspects that make their culture like their culture,
and see that as like not even it's non-negotiable. I have to keep the purity of what I view as my culture there. And I would say India does a decent job. Like
Yeah.
Like they literally took Hollywood and just changed the word of it. But like,
but there's certain things in
like,
that industry
it's
where
clearly a feature film, it's clearly an action film, but it's clearly not like
it's
so
not
much of
something.
this is
It's
Western.
not Hollywood. It's Bollywood.
Yeah, and
what made it Bollywood?
And maybe that I'm not sure that was intentional, but it seems to be they really do a like their culture and so many things that are specific to them. Like functionally, this is 60% an American movie, but that 40% is just like whoa, is so unique. It's almost alien to us,
Right?
Because
yeah.
like no, this is what we got to do to keep our culture pure. They're like it's not bad. They got a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
Like, wow, they have really nice cameras. Let's use those, you know?
Right.
Or, hey, the rule of thirds, that kind of makes sense, you know? It's like, and they're like, and no dancing. They're like, we're going to dance a lot, you know, because we want to. And that's part of our culture. And we're going to smile really big. Men are going to smile. You know, like, when in America, we're like, oh, yeah, we just.
You're just rugged. And
yeah,
all
explosions have behind us. We don't look at them, you know? Like, and so they were able to, like, I would say, I'm speaking in broad terms,
Right.
but, like, is that not a healthy way to keep. To actually keep your culture, because that's going to happen though. Like it keeps it from dying. It keeps it, but it mutates. Like
it mutates, but it's still be able. You can still say, and people of that culture can still say yes, but this still holds true to certain aspects. And I think that's the fear with other things happening in the U.S. where what was I say? Like I know there was like a lot of scare like articles like talking about yoga and what it used to be and all that stuff.
I agree.
Yeah.
So like to me, like the spiritual aspects of yoga, I think are beautiful.
Right.
Like to me, like I don't want to go to like, oh, you do yoga? Oh yeah, I do stretches. I'm like, dude, this is just a bunch of basic white girls.
Yeah.
Like this is like, I mean, I'm glad you're getting healthy, and from a pure exercise perspective, I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
But like to me, quite literally, the soul of yoga is like.
It's more
But
than
you can
just
find
that.
it. Like I've had
you can find
I
it.
went to a couple classes. I was like, wow, you were really spiritual. This is weird, you know. But
Yeah.
I was like, I'm glad it's like this, you know.
Right. But I feel like not that many people would know about that, you know, in a way.
Yeah.
I think that's the scare is that over time this yoga as an exercise would take over yoga as a spiritual, you know, as a ritual in a way.
I mean,
And that's the question. Should they, I guess, should that happen?
I guess to me that's not a problem.
Okay.
I mean, it's unfortunate because like the world's missing out on something beautiful. But if they if that thing is beautiful and you don't have the cultural lens to see it, it's not beautiful. Like if you're colorblind and you see like that, like that's going to be like that painting is only like half as beautiful without without color. And it's not that to me it's still beautiful and to me, but if the rest of the world doesn't have that lens, it's not. It's objectively not that. But obviously, again, what you focus on is not the actual beauty of the culture. It's the identity that is provided by the culture.
Right. And I guess, well, whether it's bad or good, it is that idea that identity could be lost and further disassociating itself from a certain, from a group of people in a way, correct?
But that's not the market's job. That is that people's job.
Okay.
To me, like
I'm not talking about the market in this case.
Yeah. I'd say that's it's if you let the market dictate what the fundamental ideas of your culture are, you're in for a bad time. You know, like But I mean, again, that is an ignorant statement because it acknowledges that I can as a whole we can just choose to ignore the market's cultural effect. I mean, you and I do that because we're nerds.
Yeah,
and we work really hard to see
and
that.
We love just digging into what's going on and all that.
But like what you were saying before, that it's bound to happen that culture, like, unless they are super vigilant.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, there are organizations that are basically trying to preserve this culture too, like preserve certain things too.
Yeah, and again, it's not even like a bad thing. I mean, it's just the way of nature. Like, like things die, things go extinct, and new things are made. Like, that's literally how like evolution is that. But I mean, like new species are made functionally through the time of history, and old species die. Like billions or many. You know, and the same thing like new permutations and mutations of these cultures the new creations are made, and old ones die, and. to me, I don't see that as a bad thing.
Okay.
But at the same time, I mean,
Yeah, for me, I would love to be able to like know the origins. I love etymology and all that, and see where it came from.
Can you really?
Like where it came from?
I mean, you can read it in a book, but you'll never experience what it was like to be in the 50s and feel what it was like to
actually what
to,
it was.
to want to see Elvis Presley. You can read like, oh, it was like, oh, it was poignant, you know. We're in like what we get to experience now. No one ever feel what it's like to go through the 2016 election. Like, there's no way that will ever happen again. You can read about it. You can preserve, like, we talk about never forget. I mean, it's in September 11th. Like, everybody talks about never forget. It was like, dude.
But, like, today, there's definitely folks who never knew about that.
Yeah.
And they would read it out of their history books.
Yeah. And
yes.
I mean, I guess to me, maybe... And I mean, I'm young. Again, I'm young and I'm a nerd. And I like thinking about stuff. And I got a lot of time to think about it. I don't have kids to like work on it. Then 18 years later, it's like, oh, let me catch up on culture real quick. Well, I got left behind. You know, like, that's not that's not the reality. But like, I guess to me, there's this like polar that cultural appropriation is bad. I'm like, to me, cultural appropriation and evolution is inevitable. You can say it's bad. You say it's good. I'm like, that's like saying death is bad.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, getting old is bad. Yeah, okay. So, like, it's not bad, it's going to happen. So, what is the most graceful way that I think we can... I mean, again, there's this libertarian roots or something in there. It's like, focus on yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And again, but it's that individualist, like, come from a Western culture, I'm white, and I got libertarian roots. Like, God, just individualism is like...
Yeah.
I mean, because the reality is, like I just went to Costa Rica, and seeing this culture, like, I'm an alien. Normalcy is like you don't flush your toilet paper. Like, I just fixated on that the whole week. Like, and it was beautiful to be able to observe this culture. But the reality is, I come there, I change it just by my mere presence. Like, people act differently, and enough of us come there, we start changing the culture, and it alters into something different.
Right.
That is also beautiful. Sure, it's this organic creation that is like uniquely, but it's also the death of something to me, like because that was not there. But
like you said, it's inevitable, and it's been happening.
And I don't see that as maybe again. I have not felt any like huge personal like. I haven't felt like my identity to that level has been stripped from me. But I mean, imagine it like equivalent, like I said, the Christian example is like really poignant. Like, imagine like my grandmother, like she watched this change happen from this is how Christianity was like. We'll say more static. Well, it's still dynamic, but static. Or then compared to now, she's just like, dude. I mean, we both call each other Christians, but like, I literally like again, literally not the soul of what is going on. Like you guys, we're almost a different thing now, you know, like almost a different religion.
Yeah.
And is it okay for her religion to die and her identity that she gets from it to just be an individual thing and less not a communal thing anymore?
Don't know, right? But the fact is that one day it will be totally gone. Anyway, I mean, actually, yeah, like, to be fair, like, a lot of, like, medieval music is gone too.
There's a lot of music that's gone.
Yeah, but there's still today people trying to like preserve it in terms of like by like cultural organizations or museums is the way. But I guess the question is, I guess in that case, sometimes like there's some like not complaints, but like questions whether is that how it was done back in the day and all that stuff too. Yeah, and that's my, I guess for me. I would love to be able to learn Vietnamese music. I mean, I grew up, listening to Vietnamese music, not as much to where I have no idea now what it is. But if I was to do that and try to learn it, there's not that many resources out there for me. And I guess I would love to be able to be in touch with that, but it's so difficult. I might have to actually go to Vietnam instead of like looking it up on the internet and just try to make guesses of what it could be.
But see, that's what it is. You need to like... I mean, I totally understand. Like, I mean, totally. But it's that I want to, like these, like 9 Inch Nails. I want to talk to him and just tell me about this record from 20 years ago. Like, explain all this stuff, and that information doesn't exist. Like, I mean, again, he's still alive, but like,
Oh, yeah.
but he probably forgot half of it anyway. Like,
Right.
I'll never know what it was like to be in that studio with those guys. You know, like
Yeah.
that energy, that beautiful. That's like a part of what shaped me as a human. That's like my culture,
Right.
You know, but
I'll say this: it is very easy to learn classical music. Because, I mean, it's so accessible. I mean, then like there's so many resources for it.
so to me,
When I say like, oh, I want to learn Vietnamese scale, to be like, here are the notes. But there's more to just saying these are the notes that make up Vietnamese music. There's like there's a lot more into it. It's like you should play riffs like this, but I have to actually go to Vietnam to say how is this being done right now. While for like classical music, like Western classical music, there's so many examples.
pretty well documented stuff.
It's like crazily documented to where yeah, I guess one is documented, but the way but it's just unfortunately not as well documented for other
but so
other
isn't
pieces.
that the remedy then?
To be able to document.
Well, yeah, and that's where we're trending.
Yeah.
Like the reality is like the sea of boring, like boring. Yeah, I've got a lot of like just informational YouTube videos of just like X thing.
Yeah.
is just I mean, I'm sure it's countable, but it's countless. You know,
Yeah.
and that's only going to trend more. So as we grow into a more technological society, and we have entire fields of study of like old stuff, not even history, but like understanding the social aspects of that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the negative aspect of cultural appropriation, that these cultures are lost, will become less and less a thing because they're still going to be there. They're
Right.
still accessible. And if you want to be if you think this is how you should live your life and this is the most beautiful thing in the world,
Yeah.
you will have the resources to become the what do you call it, an evangelist of this thing, which is awesome. Because I mean, and so that allows, I mean, in theory, like
Yeah.
functionally it's a little different, but in theory, like you can become an evangelist of anything that you see beautiful from history. I mean, we're becoming more and more that way. Like the culture of now, like we were talking about memes. Like memes are one of our culture's art forms.
Yeah.
And memes as they are now will not exist. They will be dead 50 years from now. I mean,
Probably. We definitely forgot a lot of things from 10 years ago.
yeah, like, you know, like TRL or whatever, you know, like how MTV is like with whatever, you know, like that's dead. But guess what? You can watch those episodes. You can watch interviews with people behind the scenes.
It still exists in documents. Like you said, well documented.
Yeah.
And if we document it well, we can still say this was how it was in the day. Unfortunately, well, maybe I'm gonna come in from a different view, especially when it comes to like different, I guess, like say Vietnamese music or even like music that's in very different tuning. There was this school in Vietnam, like a music school, where they questioned whether or not to use Western notation, to learn by Western notation or to learn, you know, by ear. You know, it's a lot easier to document with notation, obviously. However, the argument is that you can't write all of of certain aspects of Vietnamese music in Western notation. Obviously, it's easier because everyone knows it, and that's the interesting thing. Everyone knows how to do Western notation because it's so widespread.
Sure,
However,
standardized.
yeah, it's so standardized, and to where because that spread. So it makes it actually kind of difficult to document Vietnamese music. I can say like, oh, you play this note, but you bend it up a little bit more. That instead of saying these are the notes that exist in Vietnamese music, but not in Western music.
But that is simply a. But that is simply a communication problem that technology can fix. Because before, like, I have to write this in a book. And I was like, no, just record a video.
Right.
Like, and then we'll have a 3D video,
Yeah.
and then we'll eventually be able to like effectively put this person. I mean, like, obviously a simplified
Of
version of
course.
this person that I can talk to and have these questions answered.
Yeah.
And so technology will fix that
I
problem.
hope. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, it's a bummer
Yeah.
we lost all that stuff up until now.
Oh, yeah,
but, like,
exactly,
But
but-
the reality is, like, these things are like.
With what we got now, we can sure it'll quote unquote die out, but we'll still have records.
Yeah,
and hopefully accurate records of it.
Yeah, and that again, that's just, and I know that's again the responsibility. That's not a problem. That's a fixable problem if by the evangelists of the idea.
Yeah.
The what do you call it? That's not historians, but whatever the historians.
Like, cat.
Chronicle. Yeah, those people.
You know,
that lady in the Jedi Temple in episode 2, where that lady.
yeah.
And so, but I guess to me, like the cultural appropriation argument is focusing on the wrong things. To me, they're like, you can't change this culture. You can't be inspired or change because your effects may change this culture. I was like, no, you the current owners of this are going to change this culture. And why is it a problem that this person does it? And if it's so fragile and it's so unimportant to you that you can't maintain it, like it's going to happen. I mean, to me, I guess that sounds a little heartless, but accept it.
Yeah.
and do your best to and take the responsibility to preserve this for the future generations that are there. Use the tools that you have. Obviously, clearly way before YouTube, like whoever thought that the 12-tone scale and all these guys thought
would cover all at least their music, and
they thought it was so valuable that they dedicated countless works that were way before video or photo ever existed. They dedicated hundreds and thousands of hours of their life because they thought this thing was beautiful enough that it needs to be chronicled for future generations. And guess what? We can do so pretty damn close to what they were doing because of that. They took it so seriously, you know?
Okay, I get that. I mean, like, notation exists in, like, different forms of notation definitely very much exist in different cultures, in different countries. Like, Japanese has its own, the ragas of Indian, Hindustani classical music. Yeah, definitely has their own thing. Actually, it's pretty, like you said, it is well documented. It's just, I guess, with like a newcomer who because it's almost like when you're going through music school or whatever, it's almost like required that you know Western notation in a way, regardless of where you are.
Sure.
Because it's so widespread.
Yeah, I mean, it's like learning English almost. Like,
in a way.
It's the English of.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it literally.
Yeah, right.
It's the Western language.
Yeah, but then it's spread throughout the whole, throughout the world to the point where it's like, you probably should learn English. But it's like, but I'm Chinese. Like, yeah, but you should probably learn English. It's like that kind of thing. But obviously, like you said, you can't. Well, it's like what I said before. You can't impose Western notation to to a certain form of music, but you can. I guess hopefully, it makes it more difficult because everyone knows how to use Western notation.
But like I said,
like you said, it's about
I think you nailed it. It's I don't think it's a problem. It's just it is literally a problem. I mean that it's difficult.
It just makes it more difficult, and whether or not that's a bad or good thing, but it makes things more difficult.
And that's the criticism. Like, I think people aren't focused. Like, you're making this really hella inconvenient. I'm like, I completely agree with you.
Right.
But that doesn't make it impossible, and that doesn't that just puts more work and effort on the people that believe so heavily in this stuff to maintain and make sure that the future generations can understand. Whoever you're trying to pass this on,
and really,
generation.
Sure, yeah.
Like, I do a horrible job of this. Like my little brother, like he doesn't see the Fallout 1 and 2 like I do. Why? Because I haven't done a good job of writing a way for him to translate his current paradigm into this. But that is possible.
Yeah.
If I view this thing as worthwhile enough for me to deliver that, I don't. But to him, then it can be done. And I create a culture of reverence and holding these things sacred. It can be done. I think it's a functional problem.
Yeah.
Functionally solvable problem. So.
Makes a lot of sense.
Well, hell yeah, dude, thanks so much for talking, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
My own design and never lie.